Because again, just like when we're talking about through some of your earlier answers around becoming comfortable in the unknown, it's that same alignment again of like what we're trying to avoid is the trial and error. What people come to you for is, I want a definitive answer.
Right.
I want the conclusion.
Yeah.
I want the path. I want the decision, the one thing that's gonna...
I would never tell anybody what to do.
Yeah.
I believe in free will.
Yeah.
I would never tell anybody what to believe, like politically or socially or whatever.
Yeah.
I want to provide them the tools and give them the free will to create life however they want and believe whatever they want. That's totally cool with me. So those people then that want to be healed and they live in fear, that fear has to be addressed. I mean, and it's not easy because it's hardwired deep in the limbic brain. It's just a safety net. It's a mechanism. So then imagine being in the unknown. The instinct in the unknown is it's a scary place. Wow, imagine not having a body. And we practice lingering without a body in an infinite space, and without a name, without a face, without a culture, without a job, without a social security number, without a disease, without a diet, just as an awareness. You practice that. You're going to be comfortable in the unknown. You're going to relax more into it. That's going against thousands of years of programming. And the people who actually overcome their fear and they trade it for gratitude, their immune system gets stronger, their genes upregulate. I mean, there's just a host of everything changes. Their brain changes, their heart rate variability. They feel differently, and it's being measured. And some of these people, we're measuring this now in our events with reputable scientists and universities. They're shocked at what they're witnessing on a cellular level, on a brain level, on a heart level. They cannot believe the capacity of the body. I just got an email today of one of our scientists said, I ran this 3 times. The virus that we exposed the cell to in advanced meditators does not enter the cell. It's outside the cell. It won't. A virus in novice meditators, some of it's in the cell, some of it's outside. Controls all the viruses in the cell. There's an immunity. So when the person's less reactionary to their environment, there's less of response that weakens them, they're less of a victim to their environment, then they're less of a victim to their environment. Large scale, small scale, the body has a greater immunity to whatever it is. And that's the truth. That is the truth. We're measuring that. So you never know the outcome when a person really catches that thought that leads to the same choice, that leads to the same behavior, that creates the same experience, that produces the same emotion, that discomfort, that unpredictability, that uncertainty. That's the side effect of leaving the known. That's what change is about, and learning how to be comfortable in it. Instead of just white knuckling it, go, oh, I have some tools to self-regulate. I'm in fear. Oh, excuse me. And you excuse yourself, and you change that. And then you're there. And then here comes the fear again. Excuse me. And I always say, if not now, when? Now is the new later. Like, don't wait. And so the person who's no longer about healing their disease, it's about overcoming their fear. Their attention is off their disease, and their identity is changing because we're not identifying with it anymore. Now they're looking at something right in the face, and now once they're engaged, they're showing up every day, just like a workout. There's pain involved, but you move through it a little bit more, and the volume is lowered, and their response to people and circumstances are different. And then they know they're changing because people say to them, I just saw this just yesterday. People say to them, something about you is different. What is it? You get a little work done? Are you on a new medication? Because their memory of them is different. They're out of phase. We don't see things how they are. We see things how we are. So we fill in reality based on memory, and all of a sudden the person's out of phase. They're not remembering them that way. They're not that. They're in the unknown, and it's obvious. And then all of a sudden, people get raises, and they get all these great things going on. Why? Because they're leading by example. It's not what they're saying; it's who they are, and they're less responsive, and they have more patience, and they're practicing being in their heart. And when they're in their heart, they're more patient, they're more kind, they're more loving, they're more giving, and you can't create a future without putting your heart into it. And if you're throwing your heart into your future, it better be activated and coherent. And so we measure that stuff because it becomes a science, and that is the language of mysticism now.
Why is our memory for pain stronger than our memory of a success or a joy? Because it sounds like what you said, one thing that really hit me, and I loved that, was the idea of remembering, forgetting. And so often we have a positive, powerful experience, but sometimes we'll just discount it as irrelevant.
Yeah.
And then you have a negative experience and we hold on to it. Yeah. And I find that in all of this, the memory is exactly it. That you said that wisdom is when you've kind of gone down that process so far down the line where now your memory is stronger than forgetting. We forget the powerful experiences. We forget the moments where we relieve things. So why is that? And what do you do about it?
Well, I'll answer it on two levels, Jay. Thanks for the question. I really think that when the survival gene is activated, preservation is the key. So we can have 10 things that happen really great in our lives. You have a family member or somebody you know that does this. They have 10 really great things happen in there, one thing bad, and they focus on that bad thing. Why? Because the survival gene is activated. They want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So you put your attention on it because you don't want it to happen again. So what people do when they're aroused is they start thinking it's going to happen. And so they actually select the worst case scenario in their mind and then emotionally embrace that future before it happens. And they're conditioning their body to become the mind of anxiety and fear. So in preservation and in survival, if you prepare for the worst, anything less that happens, you have a better chance of surviving. So that's the mechanism that takes place. So survival means you better take care of your body.
Yeah.
You better be aware of your environment and make sure there's no threats. And so you got to keep your eye out there. And you better be thinking about the future based on what you learned in the past. Now, there's nothing wrong with that when the analytical facilities are in balance. But when there's an arousal, there's three things that create arousal: fear, hostility and anger or aggression, and pain. And that arousal drives the brain into these high states of what we call high beta. And most people need something or someone or some circumstance or some drug or some pill or some computer game to change that internal state. And the moment they notice a change in their internal state, then they pay attention to what's causing it and they start developing a dependency on it, right? So it turns out that when we teach people how to self-regulate and change their brainwaves, we could actually see then that the incoherence, the disorderliness that's taking place in the brain, when you're over-aroused, you're overly analytical, and you're shifting your attention from one problem to one person to one thing to one place to another problem to another circumstance to your phone to your car, and each one of those elements has a neurological network in the brain. So the arousal causes these different circuits to fire out of order, and the brain is incoherent. So take two waves that are out of phase and mix them. When they interfere, they flatten out. There's no energy. So energy leaves the brain, right? So then when you're in arousal, you narrow your focus on the cause. If there's something rattling in the bushes and it's dark, you freeze and you narrow your focus on it, and there's a rush of adrenaline and your pupils dilate and your heart starts to race and you're ready to run, fight, or hide. I mean, that's a survival moment, but what if it's your coworker sitting right next to you or 6 feet away and you're judging them? The same arousal's taking place, and what's once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive. And this is where it gets challenging. So when we teach people how to open their focus, we've done thousands and thousands of brain scans, and they get beyond their analytical processes and they open their awareness and go from a convergent focus to a divergent focus, and they learn how to relax and regulate. Their brain waves start to slow down into alpha. And then if they do it properly and they're connecting, those different compartments of the brain that were once firing out of order start to unify. Different communities form bigger communities. The brain starts to synchronize. And then all of a sudden you start seeing different compartments of the brain all in resonance. So now when they're all in resonance and they start interfering, when those waves come together, there's more energy in the brain. So when a person dials down the mechanism, this neocortex that plugs us into three-dimensional reality, that keeps us aware of our body, that's the autobiographical self, where everything's stitched in memory in there. When we start deactivating the mechanism here, and we get beyond the memory bank of the known self, and brainwaves move into theta, we've studied this so much. When a person can let their body be in a light state of sleep and feel so safe that you can finally let go and surrender, the body is sleeping, but the mind is awake. And now the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open. And if they can regulate and stay there, something amazing happens. There's a release of energy from the body, and their brain goes into a very, very super coherent state of gamma. Gamma is super consciousness. Now, I'm not talking about a little gamma. I'm not talking about a lot of gamma. I'm not talking about a really lot of gamma. I'm talking about a supernatural amount of gamma. There's so much order and so much energy in the brain. Like if we were in an audience and we were all clapping like this, that could be alpha, right? Theta would be, and if everybody could do this, the slower we could do it, the more we can get our timing down, the more we can get coherent. But if we were doing this, it would be really hard for all of us to do that at the same time. So it takes a lot of order, a lot of awareness, a lot of energy to be able to create that kind of order. So that's how fast the brain is, and that arousal that's taking place is ecstasy. That arousal is bliss. It is the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling that people ever have. And that memory then that the person has that is so profoundly different than the feeling of success, the feeling of wealth, the feeling of orgasm or love or whatever. This is a new one, and it's a thrill. And the person notices a dramatic change in their inner state. And with that experience comes a very lucid picture, a very profound insight, a download of information. That's the moment then. The body many times rewrites the biological program. Energy is informing matter, and the autonomic nervous system is regulating. It's in high order. And remember, disease is autonomic dysregulation. Now it's getting into a very, very high frequency of order, and it's sending very coherent information to the cells and tissues, sending energy to the cells and tissues, and cells begin to emit more coherent light and information, and then there's the disease, and there it's not. And listen, I've seen it too many times. The person said, we had a guy in Cancun in our last event that was a veteran that came in a wheelchair. He had both his knees blown out. He had broken his back. He was extreme pain on the bottom of his feet. He couldn't walk. He was suicidal. He had post-traumatic stress disorder, tried everything. First walking meditation, he's out there lumbering around on 2 crutches. Next day, he's on 1 crutch.
Fast.
In the evening of the final meditation, I swear, he's running down the beach without his crutches, and the volunteers that usually help people with handicaps are chasing him, and he's running the other way. He hit gold. There's no pain in his feet, no limitation in his body. He got an upgrade. Now that arousal, that experience, he'll never forget. That's a new one. So I think that a lot of people, we get conditioned, like, oh wow, success. But sooner or later you're gonna be like, when the novelty wears off of that.
That's not what I meant either.
But here's the cool part. The cool part is like when you hit pay dirt like that, when you connect to the field, when you connect to the divine, whatever you want to call it, when your consciousness merges with a greater consciousness, and that arousal creates ecstasy, bliss, oneness, whatever you want to call that, you realize that it never came from anything out there. It didn't come from the wardrobe or the facelift, the sports car, or whatever. It came from within you. And so you stop looking out there for it. And now the love affair begins. And you never want to miss a date because it's just too good. So that memory then, that is what I'm after. Because when you have those transcendental moments and you understand this, the experience of that transcendental moment lays down new circuitry in the brain. That's what experience does. And the experience produces a feeling, but it's not chemical. It's electric, and it's orderly, and every cell of your body is jiggling in an order. And you're aroused, and you're awakened, right? You have to admit, when that occurs, your spectrum of reality is going to broaden. Some conditioning, some illusion some belief about a white guy with a beard keeping track of if you did something right or wrong, or you failed, or you let God down. That's not how it is. Something is removed, and you start seeing reality as it is, and all of a sudden, you start seeing the part that we edit out for survival. Now you start seeing patterns and lights and information that are transcendent of three-dimensional reality, and your spectrums. Why? Because your brain had the experience and the circuitry's there, and now your experience of the world changes. You get an upgrade to the VR set, to the virtual reality set. Oh, you got the upgrade, you got 2.0, and now it looks different. Everything looks different. Everybody looks different. The world, you're seeing beauty more. Well, and there's more holism and more connection, and sounds and words and music and sense and sight and light is all working together. That's the blessing of an awakening, right? That's where we're going.
What are the things that disturb or disconnect our awakening and connection to the divine? What are those, that source or that power, that consciousness that you were speaking about? What are the things that then disturb or disconnect us from that once we become connected? Because I'm sure many people feel connected, they get it, they get a breakthrough. But then, we kind of fall back down.
Well, this is a great question also. Wow, I think a lot of times when people, they hit that point, they try to reproduce it the same way as we talked about, and you can't. You can't do it the same way because that's redundancy. But also, many times, we have the experience and we start to try. And because trying is matter trying to change matter, and so we're forcing, we're controlling, we're predicting, and then and when we do that, then of course we're in separation, and we're waiting for the event to happen to feel the emotion, right? And I've done that long enough, and it's actually we have to lay down the very thing we used our whole life to get what we want for something greater to occur, and it takes practice of surrender, right? So that's one element. I also think that our responses emotionally, like let's just say that a person gets connected to the future. They get connected to the energy of their future. They feel it. It's really great. And then they start their day, and then 2 hours later, they're feeling something else because some person or some circumstance altered their state. Well, they just disconnected from the energy of the future, and now they're back to the energy of the past. Don't expect anything to change in your life because it doesn't work that way. So then when they get back to that old self again, then they say, what's wrong with me? I failed. They didn't do it right. No, that's all the program. You show up again and you go after it again. So familiar feelings cause us to no longer see through the lens of the future. We're seeing through the lens of the past. And we color reality that way. So I think familiar emotions get in the way as well. And then, of course, there's always belief. And a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again until you hardwire it in your brain, and all beliefs are based on past experience. So a person has an experience, the stronger the emotion they have from that circumstance, the more they pay attention to the cause, and the brain freezes a frame, takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. The moment they draw a conclusion about that experience, they'll think neurologically within those circuits, and they'll feel chemically within the boundaries of the emotion. Thinking and feeling, belief becomes an unconscious or subconscious state of being. Most people don't even know they have beliefs about things, about God, about relationships, about money, because it's not a conscious thing, it's a subconscious thing. So in order to change a belief or a perception about yourself and your life, you got to go all in. It's not like you go 50% in. You got to go all in. You got to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that causes the body to respond to the mind, that the choice that you make becomes a moment in time you'll never forget. And you would say, I remember the moment I made up my mind to change. And the stronger the emotion you feel, the more you'll pay attention to the decision. And that's a huge stone you drop in the quantum field. Big splash, big waves. And in essence, we're giving the body a taste emotionally of the future. We're aligning to a new future. Now, how many times do you have to do that? I don't know. I've done it over and over again until it becomes uncompromising. And people say, I remember when I made up my mind to change. I remember I made up my mind to heal. I remember the moment I can tell you where I was who I was with, what time of day it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't like 9/11, something outer world changing your inner world. Your inner world is changing your inner world, which is
Yeah.
ultimately going to change your outer world. So, I mean, people say, well, I believe God lives within me, divine lives within me. Okay, you sit them down to do a meditation, 10 minutes goes by and they're hungry and they quit. If you knew the divine lived within you, you wouldn't
quit,
you would
yeah.
not, you would be like, I'm here.
Yeah.
And you're going to go a little deeper, a little further. You're going to get past your hunger. You're going to get past your pain. You're going to go a little further because, like, you want to know, right?
Yeah.
If you knew it was there, so that's a belief that you're not aware of, right?
Yeah.
So we all have them. I face them every day. So people have beliefs that, like, that the divine has an opinion about them. It's impossible to judge. It would divide itself. It can't do that. So as we start having these experiences, I think then our paradigm shifts many times, at least for me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had a transcendental moment, come back to Joe Dispenza and looked out in this world and I said, I got this all wrong.
Yeah,
This is
for
not
sure.
about abstaining from life. Ooh, it's the opposite. It's about going all in and really engaging and really living and really experiencing and tasting and smelling and eating and loving and we're here for that. We're here for all of that. So you create the experience, and then when it gets predictable or it gets boring, let's change it up. Let's create another one. And then how far can you go with that? It just goes on. So I think really belief is the other thing it's a blind spot that we have to become conscious to.